Okay, looks like we are live. Let me just double check the audio. Give me 1 second, everybody.
Okay.
All right. Audio is in business. So today, what we're doing is we're doing a BRRRR deal today. A BRRRR stands for buy, rehab, rent, refinance, and repeat. And I was talking to my friends Alex and Julia the other day, and they were asking me, "Hey, how do you look at a BRRRR deal?" Well, hey, let's make a video about it and let's find out. So now to stay at a higher level, right? The whole reason why you would want to do a BRRRR deal is because it gives you the ability to quote unquote recycle your capital, to allow you to scale a lot faster, because you can take the same money you put into a deal, pull it back out during a refinance, and continue to recycle that capital. What does that mean? Let's say most lenders will lend you up to 70% of the value of your home as an investment property, right? Typically in the United States, we hear this as a 20% down payment product, right? If you go buy your primary residence home, sometimes people will put 20% down so they can avoid mortgage insurance. Hence why we, in this scenario for a BRRRR deal, for an investment property, let's say using round numbers, right? You would want to buy a property all cash and pay for the rehab all cash to be 70% of what your ARV or your after repair value to be. Now, in that scenario, let's say you buy a property and you renovate the property all in for $60,000 in cash, with the anticipation that your home would be worth $100,000, right? Just based on you making it more updated, replacing a roof, gutting the home, making it look more modern, blah, blah, blah. And if you're able to get the home to be worth $100,000 based on a third-party appraiser, well, a bank will lend you $70,000, right? 70% of the $100,000. Well, if they lend you back $70,000, you just essentially got all your capital back, because you got back $70,000 that you originally put in the cash. So that's why this strategy is so popular. It's because of those folks that want to be able to scale a lot faster using the same amount of capital, because it seems more easily achievable. Now, how do you look for these deals? Let's go through a few steps here. So today, what I did was I'm in the zip code 35020. It's a little bit southwest of Birmingham, in this area called Bessemer, and it's probably governed by the Bessemer Housing Authority. I think they're like right in the middle of housing authorities that are easier to work with. Now, in 350, what I have filtered on today, just 2 to 3 bedrooms. I'm only looking for single family homes so I can stay with my comps. And for my filters, I'm looking for 2 to 3 bedroom houses, and I'm only looking for properties with at least 1,200 square feet. And that's because if you are looking to do a value add, which means you are adding a bedroom to the property to increase the value of the property, but also to increase the chances of you getting higher rents, right? If you remember the property we looked at yesterday, we saw that the rent increase from a 3-bedroom was $1,047 to $1,347 in the example that we saw yesterday. So it's almost a $300 increase in your monthly income. That could make a huge difference by just using existing square footage in your property and, let's say, building a wall, building a closet, and now you add an extra bedroom. So today I'm looking for at least 200 square feet, because if you try to squeeze 4 bedrooms in a home less than 1,100, 200 square feet, it's going to feel really tight, and it's not going to be the best experience, right? Because one of our goals is to keep our tenants as long as possible. And if they're in a home where they're uncomfortable, well, guess what? They're probably going to move out a little bit more often, okay? So with that said, what we're going to do next is this. We are going to have Brighton. Okay, now we have this home that's already contingent. So that's interesting, right? So let me pull this property up. This property contingent, so someone may offer on it for $60,000. Interesting. Okay. Do I see any photos of the inside of this property? No. So I'm going to assume it's pretty torn up. What does it say here? Investor needs some TLC, some tender loving care. Screen pad offers a pleasant space for relaxation, entertaining, 2-car detached garage, provide room for storage. This can be a fix and flip worker rental asset. room to grow. Okay, so this property has been listed on the market for 55 days and just one contingent. So good to know. 6838 square foot lot. So the lot is the total lot size of the property, and you can see the lot size just based on this little outline right here, so you can see what the actual lot looks like. So this property looks like it's on, goes from one side to the next. It's in a flood zone. Oh, it's in a flood zone. I'm not so sure you want to do that, because that might make the property a little bit more expensive to insure. So just be wary of that. You're in California, fire is a big risk, but it doesn't look like that's affecting here. So if it's in the flood zone, just be really careful. I mean, I would never buy a property in a flood zone, so I would have ruled out this property right away. But for the purpose of today's exercise, let's go through the exercise and figure out, how do you actually decide how much money you want to pay for this property in cash, how much are you willing to pay for this property for renovations to make this a BRRRR or a perfect BRRRR in a scenario where you're able to pull back out all the capital that you invested. Okay. Oh, let me turn on my chat. I always forget to do that. So in case you guys have any questions, I can try to hear them. All right. So now that I'm here, I want to show you the next step that I have in place. Now, let me go ahead and plug in some of these details. 4317 Main Street, Brian. Again, if you guys want to copy the spreadsheet, you guys can just put in or DM me the word BRRRR, BRRRR, to my Instagram account at InvestorKenHe, or LinkedIn message me. That's probably the easiest way for you to get a copy of the spreadsheet, because it's not on my website. Okay, so now that we got these details in, so we got an asking price of $60,000. Let's put 60 grand. Now, just for speed, I'm going to go through what I put in the rehab as I look through this photo. So I can't tell much, right, from these photos. I'm guessing in the dark, but that doesn't stop me from understanding, hey, what set of price or set of terms might make this a deal. So because I can't see anything inside, I'm going to assume it's probably going to be a gut job where I got to replace everything. So I'm going to assume I need to replace the whole roof. That's about roughly $9,500, right? Square feet, not 1,582 square feet for one floor, since it's a single story home. I got $500 in row 46 for landscaping. I got 1,582 square feet for painting. So I know I need to repaint the entire home at $3 a square foot. I'm also going to replace the entire flooring in the entire home at $8 a square foot to turn it into luxury vinyl plank. For my bathrooms, there are one bathroom here. So I'm going to assume that I probably need one whole bathroom replacement, roughly around $7 grand. Let me turn this to $8 grand. That's the last time I got a quote for a full bathroom renovation. Want to make it nice. And in this scenario, I'm adding about 2 bedrooms using existing square footage. So I want to use, let's say, $12,500, because I'm not converting a garage, so I don't have to re-pour concrete or redo the footings in the garage conversion. That might be about 15-20 grand, what I've noticed. If I'm just building the walls, building a closet, make sure that there's some sort of ventilation in each room. Well, that might not be as much. So I'm going to put aside about $12,500. I'm going to convert this property from a 2-bed to a 4-bedroom. Okay. Now to get there, I also have, so this is roughly around a $72,000 $500 rehab. Okay. 72.5K. That's what I'm estimating, right? If I go send a contract out there, they probably might give me more. They might say, hey, the HVAC needs to get replaced, or the air conditioning needs to get replaced. Well, let me just replace the air conditioner. So let's assume there's no air conditioning. Let me assume that I need to rewire basic electrical work. Let's do that. And replace the panel. And replace all the light fixtures. All right, so that gives me about 84 grand. Again, I could be completely wrong on this, but the point is to go through exercise of how you figure out whether or not to deal. So with the $85,000 is my rehab roughly, that's going to flow into this number right here in C9 for my rehab calculator. Okay. Now, if my purchase price is, let's say, $50,000, so it's a little bit lower, because I'm assuming I'm going to get a better deal if I offer 50 grand, right? The next thing, and the most important number, and this is an art, not a science, to be clear, you have to determine the ARV, the after repair value. What's a property going to be worth after you renovate it? And this is very important, right? Especially if you're burning a deal, trying to calculate what your after repair value is going to be based on a little bit of art, because there's no exact science, right? In a perfect world, a perfect comparable property will be this property sold right here for $100,000, 4-bed, 2-bath, 1,500 square feet. There is exactly another home right next to the home that's also 4-bed, 2-bath, 1,500 square feet, same year built, same lot size. That's, in my opinion, that's a perfect comp. But there's usually no such thing as a perfect comp. So what you have to do is you start looking for other examples, similar square footage, similar bed bath count, similar type of finishes, similar type of lot sizes, right? Similar amenities, similar divisions, similar location, right? So as you get further and further away, the best way to think about it is that you should have less and less confidence, right? The bigger the difference in that property for a renovated property versus what you were trying to do, the bigger the risk. That's how I look at these deals. Okay, so what I have done, and this is just from underwriting deals over and over, is that eventually you start building your own list of sold properties. And here I have a list, right? This is what I do. I just try to make sure I follow the sold URL of the Redfin listing, address, bed, bath, square foot, year built, sold price, the price per square foot that is sold for, the sold date, the lot size of that property, when there's a garage or basement HOA, what subdivision is that property that was sold closely in? Because, right, every neighborhood is very different. When you cross a major highway, that's technically another neighborhood. So when you cross a train track, that could be another neighborhood. So that's why every market is very different. You have to understand, hey, in this market, in this area, if you go across the train tracks there, that's a really bad area, right? Those are the considerations you need to have. And I'm only pulling in renovated properties on this list so that when the time comes, let's say I'm opening all these properties, 1630 right here, that opens here, 628, boom. And then 4011 out, boom, that's right here. So as I have these properties, okay, these are all the properties that have been sold in the zip code. Obviously, the neighborhood matters, right? So you can see that this property is in the subdivision neighborhood called Brighton. How do I determine that, right? This is 411 8th Ave. So whenever I look at sold comps, I go to the map and I do a quick zoom out and I note to myself, hey, what is the closest neighborhood? And I'm looking at Woodward, West Fairfield, Brighton, Roosevelt, Wilkes. Woodward Estates. I try to understand and put in this page, hey, this house was sold in this area in this neighborhood. And I'm just going by what Google Maps say, right? Every single market is very different because you might say, hey, you might want to look at a comp, the 4-bedroom that was sold over here, but that should be riskier, right? Because now you just cross this big Route 11, this I-11, right? I mean, not I-11, this big Route 11 over here to get to that area, right? Or you cross this little river, right? There are natural borders in every single market. There are artificial borders like highways and big routes that transforms that helps people transition from one neighborhood to the other. So you just got to be really careful, be mindful of these big main streets so that you compare apples to apples and just understand, right? Even though they might not be the perfect comp, there is inherently more risk. So this property that we're looking at 4317 Main Street, I mean, ideally, if I could find a property that's right next to it, that's the most ideal, right? So if I find comps that are in this area, that gives me the most confidence. That is the after repair value. If I find a 4-bedroom comp that goes across here, I'm going to have less confidence in that ARV value on a dollar per square foot basis. That's something you got to understand. So this property, 411 8th Ave, was sold on August 23rd, 2024. That's pretty recent. And this property, 1688 square feet. I mean, there is some carpeting here that I might do a better job of renovating, but this tells me that this home, 411 8th Ave, if I travel to 4317 Bryan Ave, how far is that? $18-minute walk. That's less than a mile away. That's pretty close. That gives me pretty good confidence that this is probably a good comp for it, even though I got other comps, right? So how far is this one? 8th Ave. Let's go ahead and plug this one in. So just remember, my main address is 4317. 4317. I'm just trying to see how far are these properties. Oh, that one's really far out, so that might not be a good comp. Like you're driving 4 miles to get there. So I'm gonna have way less confidence in this comp because it's so far away, and it's across the highway on Route 11. Let's see my other one. 628 Somerset Drive. This one's really expensive. This is right right here, a little bit less far, but still pretty far. Wow. Okay. So, I mean, that's really far. So obviously, even though you have 3 comps, right? What most people do is like, hey, give comps and give me the most average rent rated, give me the ARV based off the average square footage. You have to determine, right? This is where the judgment comes in. This is where the risk comes in. Let me plug in all these numbers. So if you were to say, hey, let me give me all these ones, right? You know, this one is a 2,900 square foot home, very, very big difference. You know, they might be comparable in dollars per square foot. What's my average per square foot? Well, it's $81. But what did we learn earlier? We learned that this property on 411 8th Ave is very close in terms of Bed Bath count that we're trying to do. In fact, we're going to be a 4-1, so our property will be worth a little bit less. But this is 1688 square foot. This is 1582. 100 square foot difference is less than a 5-10% difference. That's a pretty good comp. Year sold 1955. Where is this sold? 1974. So this home is a little bit newer. So that might give it a plus. But it was sold at 95 grand at $50, $6 a square foot. So in my scenario right now, I'm thinking like, okay, well, if I assume I'm only going to get $56 a square foot, what does that make me? What is my ARV? Well, my ARV would equals to my new dollar per square foot, uses 56 using this comp, multiplied by my square footage of 1582, right? D12, $56 per square foot that I got from here, plus my 1582. That's going to make the ARV 90 grand. Big difference, right? Versus if you were to get average dollar per square for 81, that's the difference between an 88.5K ARV to a $128,000 ARV. Big, big, big difference. Now you see the risk, right? But guess what? I only got an $81 because I'm using the comps like all the way that's really far away. And there's never going to be a guarantee. This is the risk of real estate. The further and farther you go from your existing property to your comp, the riskier it is. The less it looks like that comp, right, it is. Right? So even though I might go to a contractor and say, hey, look, I know this property will be worth $1 a square foot. If you renovate my property, look something like this, right? This is how you take the guesswork out. But if you're trying to achieve a higher return on your renovations and try to make it as close to $96 a square foot, which is based off of this property that was sold at 1588 at 1483 square foot for 142 grand, you might go to the contractor and say, hey, can you make my home look like this? Slightly nicer, but not that big of a difference. But guess what's probably driving the price difference? Probably location, right? Now, can I make my property look like this? Where this is a 2,900 square foot home, but on a per square foot basis, might be $90 a square foot? Maybe, but I don't know that much about this neighborhood. Might there be a reason why they're still paying a premium? I mean, you could try to get, hey, make my finishes look like this. But are you actually going to see comps with the similar finish like this home in your neighborhood? And by your neighborhood, I mean that on 4317 Main Street, are you going to be able to find properties in here that reflect the same type of finishes? You might not. You might not. But that's evidence that you need to be able to present in case you ever need to challenge an appraiser. So for today's exercise, I'm going to do 2 exercises. I'm going to assume, well, what if my ARV is $81 a square foot? And what if my ARV is $56 a square foot? I'm going to use 81 for now, just for exercises, because if I think it's 56, this is not going to be a deal because you're buying a property for 60 grand and you're going to renovate. You're going to buy a property for 50 grand, renovate for 85 grand. There's no way that's going to be a deal because you're going to have all your money tied up into it. You're literally spending more money than what the property will be worth at the end. That's not good business. Okay. All right. So now that we spent so much time on getting the after repair value, and I spent so much time on it because you really want to get that right, even though it's an art. You have to be able to get your own comfort around, hey, why do I think this property is going to be worth $128,000? Oh, that's because I'm using the average square foot price per square foot here. Oh, but does that make sense? Why using these 3? Are these the 3 best comps? Or maybe this is the only comp that actually makes sense. All these thoughts should be going through your head so you understand how to get your ARV. And the only way you get through this is by practicing and by building your own list of renovated properties by zip code, by neighborhoods, so you can understand what is something worth in their value. And that just comes from putting in the reps over time so you build your own master collection of recently sold comps by zip code, by bedroom count. All right. There's no getting around it. You just got to do the reps, get the comfort level, because it's all an art at the end of the day. It's a judgment call. And that's why this is risky. This is why it's not investment advice. I'm not saying I'm the best comper or a certified appraiser. None of that. This is something that you got to get comfort around. Okay. So now that we got these things in place, the next thing we want to do is, guess what do? We got to find out the rent. Remember, yesterday we looked at the HUD FMR, fair market rents. We'll click on the first link. We're going to go to access small area FMRs. We're going to click on FY 2025 small area FMRs. Go to Alabama, to Jefferson County, because that's what this property is in. And now you're going to get by bedroom count, by zip code, what the rent ceiling is, which is 1420 and 1580. But what did we learn yesterday? We learned about the rent reasonableness test. And you have to use the lower of the two when you compare the rent ceiling here, because it also includes utilities. And if you forgot, make sure you look at yesterday's video where we talked about utility allowances and how you got to subtract it. And then you got to go to affordablehousing.com and you go to the market rent estimator. Plug in the address, plug in the bedroom count, and you're going to see that the average rent for 23 units within a 2.98 mile radius is about $1,300. So because this is the more reasonable rent, right? If you guys want to look at the Housing Choice Voucher Program guidebook, let me pull that up for you. Housing Choice Voucher is what they previously called Section 8 vouchers. They rebranded from Section 8 to Housing Choice Vouchers because of all the negative connotations associated with Section 8. Well, this is why you got to use the lower rent. If you go to Section 2.2 of the Housing Choice Voucher Program guidebook, it says that in conducting rent reasonableness, the PHA, or the Public Housing Authority, must determine whether the rent to the owner is a reasonable rent in comparison to rent for other comparable unassisted units. So you can't charge more rent simply because they're a voucher holder. So obviously the size, unit type matters. But in this scenario, when you look at the market rents, chances are that these are all 4-bedroom single-family homes because people don't really build apartment buildings with 4-bedroom units. So that's why I'm pretty good confident that these are 4-bedroom homes. Hence why I'm putting $1,300 in C13 on the spreadsheet as my rent. For taxes, I'm assuming about $100 a month. For insurance, it's about $1,050, just what I'm paying right now for a 4-bedroom home. So I'm leaving that as is based on my knowledge. You should obviously check with the county assessor records to get your taxes correct and correctly estimated. And you should get an insurance quote from an insurance broker. This is not an insurance advice. From insurance brokers so that you know what your premium is so you can update your numbers accordingly. We got our ARV, right? So right now I'm using $81, even though I truly believe it's 56, but at 56 is not a deal. So for today's exercise, let's assume it's $81 a square foot. That gives you an ARV of 128, okay? Now, for my buy, I got $128,000. My purchase price was $50,000, like we talked about earlier. My rehab is $85,000. I got 5% for my closing costs in this scenario because these properties are pretty low. I got other acquisition and holding costs. So now my total ARV is, actually I got to bump up my closing costs because I just got a quote for $4,100 for processing fees on let's say it's a fix and flip loan, but let's just assume there's some legal fees with someone lending me money. So in this scenario, let's assume that someone is lending me money at a 10% interest rate. And using that loan, I can buy this property all cash and fund the rehab all cash. So someone's lending me, private lenders lending me $50,000. They're also lending me $85,000 to do the rehab. So in total, I'm borrowing 130 for, let's call $135,000 for easy numbers. After my holding costs and my closing costs, I'm really all in this property at $145,000. Okay. Keep that in mind, right? At $145,000, that's how much I'm spending for a home that's worth only $128,000. Does that seem like a good idea to you? I certainly hope not, because what does common sense say? Why would you pay more for a property than what it is worth? Unless it can provide you more value. Okay. Now you can plug in your deal details there. If you have different fix and flip loans or DSCR refinance loan, like you can definitely put them in here. Now for my rehab amounts right here, that folded in there, and it got some closing costs for $700. We already went through the rehab calculator, so my rent assumption is going to be at $1,300 right here in C3. That's what we said. My cash flow refinance is going to be based on my refi tab. So let's go to my refi tab. I'm going to assume that my interest rate that I just got quoted was 7% for 80% LTV. So I'm going to do 0.8. So now I'm updating the status to 80% LTV for this loan. And at 80% DSCR refinance on this loan, I can get back out $102,000, $102,514, even though I spent a total of $145,000 on the deal. So this tells me that I'm going to be leaving in $42,500 on this deal after my refinance. What does that mean? Well, if I leave in $42,500 rehab, then what does that mean? It means that I am currently at about 6% cash on cash return. That tells me this is not even close to being a deal, even when you BRRRR it, even when you refinance it, because of how much money you had to leave in the deal. Okay. So this is thinking of our ARV. We paste specialist so I can make sure I calculate all these values and source formatting. And this is assuming their ARV is 128 and the purchase price is $50,000. I just want to write down all these different things. So let's go ahead and try to figure out, okay, how do I make this a better deal? Let's go to my info tab. Let's say I can buy this property for $30,000. What does that mean? Well, all this stuff flows out. And when you understand how that worked out, well, now all of a sudden, the purchase price is $30,000. And now this is your new return for this scenario. Pay special, value source formatting. And now if I can get if I can get the property for $30,000, it might be a better deal for me because now my cash and cash return in year 2, assuming I'm fully up and running, is 12%, especially if your minimum criteria is 10%. But that's a lot of risk. That's a lot of execution risk for you to take on to only make a 12% return, right? Because you're spending $80,000 on a rehab. And again, the property is going to be worth less than when you put into it. That's got to be really, really careful. So let's just show you how bad these numbers are. Like, let's say this was truly $56 a square foot and your ARV is only $88,000. I mean, this is just not a good deal. ARV, you're only going to get back out $70,000. So you're leaving in a total of $51,000. Not a good deal because you're leaving in so much capital. Oh, this is when you bought. So if you bought this property for $50,000, that's what makes the deal so low because it's 7%, right? So you know it's definitely not a deal if you're using this property as a comp for $56 a square foot. So let's go back to $81 a square foot to get back to an ARV of 128. Now, let's say you can get the property for $20,000. Okay, does that make it more interesting? If this property is indeed worth 128, which I don't believe it is, but again, for sake of exercise, if you get to $20,000, how much money are you leaving in this deal now? You're only leaving $8,850. So if you're leaving it in only $8,850, now all of a sudden this is better. So in order for this to be a deal, quote unquote, and your rehab, assuming everything else stayed the same, right? You're still renting on the property for $1,300 a month, and your ARV is still 128. And just change it so it's all consistent. And you're leaving $88.50 because you can get this property for $20,000. Assuming your rehab is $85,000, then this would be the only deal. So you might make an offer on this property for just $20,000, even though it was listed for $60,000. I'm gonna pay attention to this property. I'm gonna favorite it. I'm gonna see what it closed for because I'm really curious. I'm really curious about what they bought it for, because then it tells me what they thought the rehab was amount for. Because in order for this to be deal, probably would have had to look something like this. So if I can't get $30,000 lower on my purchase price from my original estimate, maybe I can get my renovation earlier down by $30,000, and that will still be a deal, right? So you can flip those levers, right? Just because you can't get the purchase price down by $30,000 doesn't mean that you aren't a contractor and you can't hire a contractor that does it for $30,000. But huge amount of risk. So hopefully this was helpful, everybody. My hope is that you learn how to underwrite a BRRRR deal. Sometimes it's a great strategy, but we don't exactly understand, hey, how do you translate a BRRRR deal into a set of terms that actually make it a deal? And today we went through a bunch of scenario analysis by adjusting the ARV, adjusting the purchase price, which you can apply that towards a rehab amount. But you got to go through the different scenarios and figure out, hey, how do I make this a deal? What do I need to buy it for? And what does my rehab need to be? But all of that is informed by your ARV. So that's why I think it's really important when you are finding comparable properties. I would definitely prioritize the bedroom count. I would definitely prioritize properties that are in the same neighborhood, because the further you go, the higher risk it is that it's not a good comp, or it's a less effective comp, or it's the worst representative of how much someone on the market is willing to pay on a dollar per square foot basis for your property, because that's exactly what an appraiser is going to do for a single family home. So as you cross natural borders, that becomes more risky. Like if you go across a river, if you go across a highway, a big interstate, or a big main street, that's going to make it more risky. So understand, when you look at ARV, you have all these different factors in place, and these are not the only factors. But these are some things that I think off the top of my head, that as these factors differ than my property that I'm renovating, the higher a risk. So you got to decide what that risk is. And that's why this is so important. It's not investment advice. You have to understand what your risk appetite is. You have to understand and have the level of confidence in yourself that you know what you're doing when you're looking for ARV. Because if you have a really bad ARV, chances are you can go from overestimating your ARV, where you were thinking you were going to make 27% return on your money, to now all of a sudden realizing that you're only going to make 6% on your money because you didn't estimate the ARV correctly. These things happen every single day. They affect how much you're willing to pay for their home. So just be very mindful of that. All right. Alex, Julie, thank you for jumping on a call with me. I appreciate you all so much. I love underwriting these deals. I love doing this in partnership with other people. I just love sharing this information. I'm so glad you guys reached out and made this feel, all this effort was worth it. After going live for 368 days in a row, this was really cool. I'm so glad this was helpful for everybody. And that's it. I hope you guys all have an amazing Wednesday. I hope you all are able to spend some quality time with your family and friends today, because that's what life is all about. All right. Hope you all have an amazing day. I'll be back here again for day 369 tomorrow, but I'm not going to underwrite a deal tomorrow. I'm going to talk about a different subject, because I've been underwriting deals every single day for 369 days. I'm still going to keep on doing it, but now I want to figure out what other questions do you all care about? And I'm going to cover that. All right. Have an amazing day, everybody. I'll talk to you all tomorrow. And you guys want to copy the spreadsheet? I didn't make the spreadsheet from scratch. I got it from a few other folks, but this was the fastest way for me to modify it, edit it, so that we can figure out what a deal is and what a deal isn't as soon as possible. Have an amazing day, everybody. Talk to you all tomorrow.